I see some people joining, so we can go ahead and get started. Well, welcome everybody. My name is Rocio Ortega, and I work with Girl Up at the United Nations Foundation. And thank you so much for those that are tuning in. I'm seeing the numbers go up. We're now up above 20 and rising, so that's amazing. So this webinar is called Sports for a Purpose, Keeping Girls in the Game. And as you can see in my background, hopefully if you're joining by video, I am a big basketball fan, hence the Los Angeles Sparks background. I'm also from Los Angeles, so if you have any of your home sports teams that you want to shout out throughout today's webinar, definitely let us know. On that note, we do have a feature if you're joining via Zoom is our Q&A. So throughout the session, we will actually be choosing the questions that you're submitting in real time, and hopefully we can answer as many of them as possible because we have an amazing speaker today. Now, before I introduce our speaker for today, I want to share a little bit about Sports for a Purpose because I realize that maybe some of you, this is your first time hearing about Girl Up, listening about sports, gender equality. You're like, what is going on? So just to give a quick background, Girl Up is here for you all. It is a leadership development program for girls like you and me. And I say you and me because I also participated in these programs when I was in high school. So if you think about what platform can I use to raise awareness about gender equality, about reducing the wage gap, about, media representation for women and girls all around the world, Girl Up is definitely your place to do that. And I hope that you join us through our journey as we achieve gender equality. Now, Sports for a Purpose, how that came into place. And I see a couple of girls also from California, we have Washington, D.C., and all other parts. So that is super exciting to see everybody joining. So Sports for a Purpose really came together because of you all, because we recognize that sports is a gender equality issue. Hey, we start thinking about, how much women are paid versus men's team, the gender wage gap is real. And we know that that issue goes beyond just sports. If we think about media representation, we know that it's not just sports and other outlets that show the inequalities on how women and girls are represented. And a lot of the times it has to do with who are the people behind the camera in the decision-making rooms, who are really influencing how we perceive that media. And just to share a little bit, probably later, but you can find so much more information on just how sports affects women and girls around the world. Where are we advancing and where are we not advancing? As some of you may know, this summer, we had the Summer Olympics, were now postponed in 2021. But what was so special about this upcoming Olympics is that for the first time, we were seeing the highest percentage of female athletes participating at this international sports event. And while we think that that is so exciting and so amazing, and it is a step forward in the right direction, we also have to think about who are the women in these decision-making positions. And sadly, we're not there as much as we should be. So this is just part of an online series to educate you all about the gender inequalities in sports, but also expose you to amazing mentors like we have today, amazing professionals who are working in this space every day and are making a difference. But also because of these times, how can you still be an online gender equality advocate in sports? So we're going to talk about that a little bit. But right now, I want to introduce our amazing speaker, Kate Abdo, who is a sports broadcaster and who, as you all sometimes wonder, how do we reach out to amazing speakers? Sometimes it's the power of Instagram. So shout out to Naomi from our team who reached out to Kate on Instagram, and Kate gracefully accepted to having this webinar with you all. So I don't want to give too much of your introduction because I know we're going to talk about that a little bit, but so why don't we go ahead and jump into some of the Q&A questions. And again, everybody, please go ahead and submit your questions in the Q&A portion, and we'll be hand selecting them in a few. And Kate, for your awareness, I see I have more girls that join now. We have Mexico, Zambia, India among the mix. So thank you so much, everybody, for joining. I know we're all in different time zones, so we're going to have a great webinar. So Kate, thank you again for joining. Why don't we kick off with a question that I know I'm curious about as well. So I'm wondering if you can share a little bit about what has been your journey to sports, and if you, when you were in high school, if you played any sports or anything like that.
I played pretty much every sport growing up. My parents were sports teachers, so I was kind of pushed into everything from a very young age. Fortunately, I liked that, so it didn't matter. Track and field was probably the one sport that I really kind of was drawn to, and that's the one that I then continued throughout high school and later as well. So I was at the track kind of 6 days a week, probably. It was just my happy place, probably. But I think, in terms of my journey to sports and how I ended up sports broadcasting, soccer is just a massive part of UK culture, or European culture in general, and increasingly so over here in the United States as well. But both my parents were avid football fans. My dad's a massive Man United fan. My mum is a massive Liverpool fan. If anybody knows soccer, that's generally a problem. And so I kind of just grew up with soccer being a big part of life. It was actually still more seen, even though my mum was such a big football fan, it was definitely still seen as the boys' territory. So my dad was a season ticket holder. For him and my brother, they would go to the games every weekend, and me and my mum would sit at home and watch them on the TV. That was just kind of the accepted norm back then. I think nowadays, hopefully, you see more and more girls in the football stands, and that has definitely shifted. But football was kind of always part of life. Boxing is the other sport that I broadcast. My journey to that sport came a lot later. But soccer was kind of always part of life.
That's amazing to hear. I think it takes a big toll when your family is also interested in sports. I know it's something we've heard from girls. They're like, my dad is my biggest role model because he helps coach my team, or something like
Right.
that. So I think seeing those family values really does go a long way. So I think let's take it back a little bit. And we talked about this a little bit yesterday. I'm wondering, a lot of our girls that are tuning in right now, they're in high school. They're thinking, like, what am I going to do in my life? What am I studying? And so there's no lying that there's a lot of pressure to know, like, what is it that you're going to be in life and what should you study? So I'm wondering if you can walk us through a little bit on, think back on like your school days and thinking, what am I going to pursue? What is my passion? Just curious to know, like, if there's anything that stands out for maybe like your college years that can help a lot of our high school girls right now.
I think there was probably a really long period where I didn't know what I wanted to do, which I think is the case with so many people, right? It's really hard to know what you want to become, especially if your circle is relatively, especially if you're not exposed to a lot of different opportunities. And so my parents were both teachers. They both taught sports. And for a long time, I think I thought I was going to be a sports teacher because I didn't really know what else to do, and I liked sports. So I thought maybe that was it. The other subject that I think I enjoyed at school, which is probably what I ended up orientating myself on, was what I enjoyed and what I felt like I achieved in, was languages. And I guess at some point I came to the conclusion that I didn't want to be a sports teacher. I'm not exactly sure why. I felt like I wanted to go in a different direction, or I thought, let me at least study languages first because I enjoy that. I want to travel. I don't think that my decisions were based on anything hugely profound, other than I'd like to see different countries. I'd like to go and live in different countries. That's a great way to study languages. Let me go and do that. And then I kind of figured that after that was all done, I would figure out what I wanted to be, or what I was going to become. So I decided, once I had finished high school in the UK, I was 17, and I decided to move to Spain to learn Spanish because I hadn't been able to learn Spanish at school. So I went there. I was going to initially my plan was just to do a year over there and then come back to the UK and carry on with education there. But I ended up liking it so much. I learned Spanish in 6 months. I decided to do the high school diploma so that I could then start college over there. And then I did college over there. And again, languages, because I was going to do a degree in Spanish, and obviously I'd only been studying Spanish like 6 months. I figured that probably the easiest thing to do would be to do a translating and interpreting degree rather than trying to study history or something else in Spanish, which I found the idea of it overwhelming. I took Spanish and French because I'd done French at school. I had the choice then between Russian and German. So I ended up taking German, not for any other reason other than it seemed like it might be easier than Russian. And so that was kind of how my decisions were made. I don't feel like it was particularly targeted towards anything. It was just something, the subjects that I felt I could achieve at and the subjects that I felt I enjoyed. And actually, I don't think that's a bad way to make your decisions. I do think it's kind of important to do something that gives you pleasure. And so I went through that degree and I was studying translating and interpreting, and I actually really enjoyed it. I really loved it. And it was what I wanted to do. And when I came to the end of that degree, I was offered an opportunity to go and do an internship at a German TV station. It just so happened that it was a TV station. It was the fact that they broadcast in multiple languages. So they broadcast in Arabic, in Spanish, in English, in German, and I could speak 3 of those. So they used to hire interns who would translate the content, and it could be used for the different outlets. And so I took on this internship, and I started off interning on the business desk, translating about stocks and shares, which I was totally unqualified to do and out of my depth. And I asked if I could move to the sports desk because I knew that was my comfort zone. Football is really big in Germany. I knew that was something I could talk about, and I could talk about comfortably in multiple languages because it had always been a topic of conversation for me. So I ended up moving on to the sports desk there. But really, in terms of college and knowing what I wanted to do, I don't think I did. I think I just chose something that gave me pleasure. And as it worked out for me later down the line, that worked out really well.
So awesome to hear. And I think even for, I know the adults like also listening, it's just studying what you wanted to study. And I think one thing that stood out to me from listening to you was just the fact that you asked like, hey, I actually don't like this. Can I go to sports? And I think taking that initiative is something that our girls can take, is that you can always choose where you want to be, right? That's so awesome that you know so many languages. I know some of our girls speak like 4 or 5 different languages. So I'm like, you're prepared for the world. So my next question to you is, and you talked a little bit more about it. So now that you're working at Fox Sports, I'm wondering, how does your day-to-day look like? What we see you on broadcast on television, but what happens behind the scene? What does your typical work day look like?
It's a different job. It's not a 9-to-5 type thing. So it's definitely every day looks different. And that's one of the things that I enjoy about the job. Working hours are irregular. So they will be centered around when live events are or live sports are, rather than, a regular 9-to-5 schedule. I think for everybody in TV, it looks different. My process is I like to, if it comes to soccer, I like to watch a lot of games. I like to try and I do Champions League for TNT. So that means being across a lot of different leagues and trying to catch up on, Bundesliga, Serie A, Ligue 1, La Liga, everything, Premier League. So I try and I record a lot. I watch a lot of the games. I listen to a bunch of podcasts. I do a bunch of research because I think essentially in my role, the biggest part of it is being prepared. The person that the onus is on to do the talking is the analyst, but they can only, part of my job is empowering them to talk well and empowering them to talk about what's interesting. So I need to be able to draw that out. So I need to understand the context of the story. If they perhaps refer to something that doesn't make sense to an audience without an explanation, I need to be in a position that I can give that good context. So for me, it's a lot of prep, which I do on my own, and I do in my own time. And then of course, there's a much bigger world around that with the production team who bear all the weight of the putting a show together, coming up with a lot of the ideas, stuff that I then structure my research around, looking at a script that's been written, changing it so I feel comfortable with it. And then going in, of course, there's, for women, there's the whole process of hair and makeup, which takes an hour and a half, or for me, sometimes 2 hours, just to get ready. And then we'll have, we'll go in, we'll generally have a production meeting before a show. Every network does it differently. But if we're talking about Fox Sports, we'll have a production meeting before a show, which would include, the producer, all the team that are going to be in the control room and involved in the production of the show. We'll have the guys who are going to be the analysts in there, and we will talk through a lot of those ideas. And I think that's a really helpful process to kind of figure out you know, what are the strong talking points? What's interesting? Where do these guys talk best? I think a big part of my job is listening and kind of understanding how to get the best out of other people. That's what I see my role as. And then we go and we do something, whether it be live or whether it be, you know, pre-recorded or recorded as live. And then it's time in the studio. And, you know, I think everybody looks at TV and thinks it's a really glamorous job. And it is in many ways. You know, I'm very blessed. I have a job that feels like a lot of fun. And the biggest fun part of it, I suppose, is probably the fact that you get to spend time talking about a subject that you love and doing that with people that, generally speaking, you admire because they achieved at a high level in the game and you respect their opinion. So, you know, it's not lost on me that it's a really privileged position to be in, and it's a great job to have. But, you know, it's a long journey to get to that point. And I think, you know, a lot of people look at TV and they just kind of want to go straight from college to being on TV. And I think there's a long journey in between.
Thank you for sharing that. And I think you hit on amazing points. It's like we're hearing from you what it looks like on the other end, because we only receive what we see on television, right? And so I'm wondering, you know, and this goes to some of the questions that girls are asking, but we know that overall sports is a male dominated field. Like, it's not just the athletes, but, you know, who are the ones, who are the journalists, who are the decision makers. So I'm wondering, you know, just from your perspective, why is it so important to have different perspectives in the room or in these different roles?
I think that's important in any industry. I think that, you know, especially these days with sports, the demographic has shifted a lot, right? So you look at the fans, and there's a huge percentage of female fans. So to me, it seems disconnected if you have a massive percentage of female fans, whether it's in the stands, at home watching, the viewers, etc., and not to see that represented then within the production around a sport. So I think it's massively important. I think it's important in any walk of life, because you know, women are central to society. I think it's important for young girls to grow up looking at what they can achieve and seeing that as being a possibility, because it's something they see on television. Television is hugely influential in how we see the world. I think it's important for women to be represented, and not in the way that we have to have a woman doing sports, just simply in the way that if a woman is qualified to do something and she is able to talk about the sport in a way that is intelligent and informed, there's no logical reason for her not to have an opportunity at getting that job or being represented within a production team or on, you know, on set as talent. To me, that's always the most important thing. It's kind of, are you equal to it? If you can do an equal man to an equal job to a man, there's no reason why you shouldn't be on that platform and on that stage. I don't, you know, think that we should have women for the sake of having women. I think we should have women who are qualified and represent other women well, so that this then perpetuates itself and we keep on seeing more and more women. Because I think as soon as you earn respect within a position like that, you know, people can't take it away from you. It's a fact that you're going to have to come up against men feeling cynical about whether you're in that position for the right reasons. And men will frequently look at a female broadcaster, especially particularly in sports, and feel like she probably doesn't know what she's talking about. I think there are multiple examples of women these days who now have broken through and have really proven that they've deserved a role, and that they can ask interesting questions, ask the right questions, draw out a different perspective, or be a fantastic analyst. You know, we see more and more female analysts as well, which I think is a really important progression. So I just think it's about, previously, I guess you weren't given the opportunity to be equally as good as a man, whereas I think now there is more opportunity to do that. We need to see more and more of that. But you know, I'm just excited to be able to get to be on that stage.
That's amazing. And we have a very interesting question from one of our girls, Emily. And she wants to know, what has been the hardest challenge that you've had to overcome, and how did you overcome it?
The toughest challenge? Gosh, I don't know. I think, so my career actually started at that German TV station. there was a series of events that happened whereby one of the male sports broadcasters left. And I was offered an opportunity at a casting. I took the casting, and then I ended up getting the job, and I kind of went straight onto TV from there. So my route into being on TV was kind of unusual and weird, and very fortuitous. But so I kind of found myself in that position, and I think I thought I'd just been lucky, and I wasn't really sure that I deserved the chance, or that I was worthy of kind of having that opportunity and being on television and talking about sports. I felt like I knew what I was talking about, but I wasn't really sure why I should be given that platform to do that. And from being at Deutsche Welle, DWTV, the German TV station, I was offered an opportunity at CNN. And I remember I flew out to the casting, which was in Atlanta. I went to that. I didn't hear anything for a while, and then I got offered the job. And I kind of couldn't believe that had happened. And I remember when I was first introduced to the team, and I hadn't met any of the team because the job was in London, but I did the casting in Atlanta. So I'd have my whole interview process over in Atlanta. So I hadn't gone through the process of convincing anybody in London. I'd just done that on the American side. And then I was given the job in London. And I remember the first day, and I remember when I walked in, and I was young, and I was inexperienced in comparison to many of the other sports broadcasters at CNN. And I had no qualifications in terms of journalism, which all of them did have and kind of thought of as prerequisite. And my journey had just been very different. And I brought different things to the table. I could speak multiple languages, so I could interview players in different languages, something that none of them could do. And in football, which is so massively multicultural, that's, a huge asset to have. So I brought different things to the table, but not the things that they thought were important. And I remember they all took me out to lunch as kind of like a welcome, but it felt like an interview, and it felt like a 1 hour kind of onslaught of questions in which I knew I was supposed to prove my validity for the role. And it felt like, even though it was under the guise of a welcome lunch, it felt like a very pressured situation that if I made any mistakes, that would ultimately define the rest of my time at CNN, because I would have lost their respect and lost their willingness to believe that I should be there and I was there for the right reasons. And so that was probably a moment that felt extremely daunting to me, especially because I lacked some of the self-belief that I was there, that I deserved to be there as well. And I think when I came through that, and I came out the other side, and I felt like I had done the job I needed to do, that gave me confidence then moving forward at CNN that actually, okay, I've won the respect of my colleagues, which helps me win my own respect, and now I can kind of move forward.
That's a great answer, and thank you for sharing that. One of the other points that we're trying to do with Sports for a Purpose and girls that are participating is this mentorship piece, and recognizing how important it is to have other colleagues, mentors, teachers, coaches that are really there for you to guide you and mentor you. So I'm wondering if you had any mentors in your life that helped you in your early career or even now.
That's interesting. I didn't have any female mentors. I didn't actually know many females in sports. And so I think it's always important that whatever environment you're in to kind of identify people that you want to learn from, and that you aspire to be like them in certain ways professionally. There was definitely a producer I had back right at the very beginning at DWTV who gave me confidence in myself, who had belief in me, and I guess saw potential within me. And I think it's really important to find somebody close to you who kind of builds you up. Other than that, there was a broadcaster I worked with when I was at Sky Sports in the UK. So from CNN, I went to Sky Germany. They were launching a new network. And then from Sky Germany, I went to Sky UK. And Sky UK is a totally different market to the other ones that I had been in. It feels very aggressive in terms of, people wanting to progress, because football is everything there. And so it's an aggressive market. And there was a guy that I did a show with once a week, and he just impressed me. And I just used to kind of observe always and watch what he did. It wasn't necessarily a mentorship, but I don't think, I think it's a great thing to have if you can find the right person to kind of give you advice. And it's great. I know we always say that, you know, you learn from your own mistakes, but I actually think sometimes it's great to not have to learn by that and to kind of learn from other people's wisdom who have already been there and gone through a process. I didn't necessarily have that, but I did have people that I looked at and I kind of observed and figured out, well, what do they do and how do I not copy them? Because I think you always have to be authentic and do things in your own way, but you can definitely pick up what's the best of what other people do and adopt that as your own and kind of integrate that into who you are and how you approach your things.
That's awesome. And I'm sure girls are going to take what you're saying right now and make it their own too. So thank you for sharing that. I'm actually going to choose a couple of questions that we have from girls because I see them pop in. So this one is from Angela. In an environment where sports are less popular and where the issues aren't much listened to, how do you think we can encourage women and girls to participate and create safe, inclusive spaces for prospective to explore sports or players?
Are we talking about an environment? Do you assume we're talking about an environment as in right now during the whole Corona time that sports aren't a priority?
I think this one might be a little general, like probably pre-COVID.
Okay.
How do you create the safe spaces for girls to just even try sports?
I guess that starts young, right? It probably starts at school. I think that, you know, you would hope that it starts in the home, but you can't always guarantee what's happening in those environments. So I think it's really important that schools make everything available to both sexes. I think it's important that girls are kind of encouraged into achieving athletically. I think often, you know, there's so many stereotypes around there. And I think we often, you know, you can look at media, television, social media, Instagram, whatever, and we're kind of indoctrined to think of men as achieving athletically and women looking beautiful. That's kind of what social media teaches us, right? But there's also, there's different influences out there that you can choose to follow, which will encourage you to achieve athletically. And I think that's important to kind of choose your influences and choose the people that you follow so that you're getting the right impulses that will help you value and judge yourself in the right way. I think it's really important that, you know, kind of at a federal level that there are I guess, setups created that encourage young girls and that give opportunity to young girls. I think it's important that opportunities are made available to people of lower income so that opportunities are made available. You know, I think soccer, for example, is one of those sports that in many ways can be so easy to play. All you need is the ball, right? That's all you need. And goals you can create with whatever, whether it's a couple of sweaters that you throw on the ground or whatever. But often in this country, it's actually an expensive sport to take part in. And that's a real sadness to me because it's such a beautiful game and such a game that, you know, kind of connects across cultures that I'd love to see that change. And I'd love to see, you know, more subsidized groups and courses and classes being made available to different people. I think that would be a fantastic thing to do. I think it's also really important to set a standard. So for example, with the issue that you have going on right now with the US women's national team, who is suing the US Soccer Association because of the fact that they're not paid equally. Well, you know, this is the highest level achieving team in soccer in the United States. And for those women not to be equally respected, it seems, because they're not being equally paid for equal play, I think doesn't set the right tone. And I think if you correct things at that macro level, then that also trickles down because it sets a precedent that the women's game matters. And if, you know, the United States women's national team, which achieves at the highest level again and again and again, wins World Cups again and again, in a way that the men's team doesn't, but it still isn't given the same position and power because those women aren't empowered to play the game in the same way because they struggle with earnings or they don't, you know, it just doesn't create the right environment for women to think that this is something that has to be respected or that this is something to aspire to, in the same way that I think young boys are given those impulses. So I think if we can see big changes happen at that level, and I'm hopeful that that particular change will come through, then I think it makes a real difference too.
Yeah, I think we're all keeping an eye on the trial, which I think is set to start next month, I believe. But I think a lot of our girls ask these questions because they're so they see inequalities not only in their communities but also around the world, and that is what I think connects all of us girls, is that we have this experience of we want to achieve so much more, but the gender inequalities still exist. So
Mm-hmm.
whether it's a girl in India or a girl like in rural town America, like how are their experiences the same, how are they different? And I'm glad you brought up the point on accessing sports. Like I think that's one of the first barriers, is like do they even have a soccer ball? And just to give a sneak preview to all of the girls listening, this is an issue we're going to take on later on this year, in terms of how do you make sports accessible for girls in developing countries, because I know that's something that you all care about, which I always find admirable, that you care about the issues that happen in your communities, but also for girls around the world. So let's move on to the next question, because I see more popped up. So this one is coming from Mexico. I don't know if you want to answer in Spanish, but the question is from Cristina, and she wants to know, I would love to work someday in sports industry. Any advice, especially being a woman in an industry that is dominated by men?
Yes, Christina, I think my advice would be, and it's not necessarily about, well, it is about achieving as a woman, but I just think that it's important, any environment that you go into. I think if you're the hardest working person in the room, as a woman, it can be easy to be overlooked because there is an assumed level of expertise with men in sports that women don't benefit from. If a guy is applying for a job or going for a job or has been given a job, it's assumed that he knows what he's talking about just because he's male when it comes to sports, right? And that assumption isn't necessarily there with women, so it's something you have to work against. I think that if you go into any given environment and you prove yourself as the hardest working person, I think that work ethic and hustle, and the ability or the willingness to put time and effort into something, ultimately it becomes really hard for anybody to overlook that. So I think if you can prove yourself, and you can argue whether or not we should have to prove ourselves, but it is what it is, right, ultimately. And if you're willing to put the effort and the time in to be able to do that and to put yourself into that position, once you've won people's respect, I think it's that's yours. Then you've got it, and that will be lasting. So I think it's just about work ethic. I think is really important. And I think also as a woman, you kind of have to be aware that your choices will be defining, and your choices are really important. And so whether that's I think it's just about making the right impression is really important. There are certain things that we can benefit from as women within sports, which is, it's probably easier if you're a pitch side reporter to be able to get a player to come over and talk to you, because they're just more willing to do it than they are with the 25 men who are standing on the sideline next to you from other networks. There are advantages to that. There are advantages always to being different. And I think as long as you are different and do it with poise and with class and with knowledge and substance, then you're in a great position. So I whilst it is a disadvantage as you're looking to progress through, there is also an advantage to being a woman, because you stand out from the rest of the crowd in sports, and that can be a great thing.
We have another great question from, I believe you pronounce it Maisie. Was there a difference in the environment working in different countries? Meaning, were some more open than others to the idea of working alongside a woman in sports?
That's interesting. I think from my experience, the United States has probably, or actually definitely been the most progressive in terms of that. I've always worked in countries that feel that they are relatively progressive as far as that goes. I've worked in the UK, Germany, Spain, America. They're not countries where I feel like there's a massive issue with that. I feel like we're all working to try and get into the same position. I'm really impressed with the United States in the way that it does promote women. I've seen more female soccer analysts here than I've ever seen anywhere else. You know, in boxing as well, you have powerful women like Christina Poncher from Top Rank, who I believe she's only the second woman ever to be a play-by-play commentator in global boxing. You know, I think there are opportunities in America, and America is really good at seeing that the women are a valuable part of the workforce, and that they have a voice within sports as well. I do think it's progressing. You know, in the UK, you see that more and more now, with Alex Scott being a really dominant part of their coverage in football. It's definitely moving in the right direction, but we're a long way from seeing enough women in those positions. But as far as discrepancies in the countries, I don't think so massively. You know, it probably also, if we're talking about soccer, it probably also depends just how big the women's game is in those countries. So I think Germany was pretty progressive as far as that goes, because you end up having female players and women's voices around the game that carry more weight. You know, Birgit Prinz had been a really big figure in women's football in Germany for a good number of years, and she was a respected voice, and she had won respect in terms of talking about the men's game as well. And so the bigger the women's game and the more present that is on television, then I think that the more advanced the country is in terms of including those voices in their coverage of the men's game as well.
I think, you know, on the flip side, you know, as audience members, as fans, you know, it's also our responsibility to support a lot of the women's teams, because I think that's how a lot of this is determined, you know, whether to invest in women's sports teams. You know, are they selling the tickets? Are people showing up to the games? I know for Washington, D.C., where our Girl Up office is located, the women's basketball team won their championship and they didn't get a parade. But, you know, the men's baseball team did get a parade. So, you know, just knowing how there's so many inequalities on that, I think it's also our responsibility to show up to those games, whether it's at your high school, hopefully when all this is over, or even viewing to watch the WNBA games. That takes a big toll. And just a little bit of the responsibility that we also have to support them.
Totally.
Yeah, so I want to go ahead and answer the next question. And this is from Pallavi from India. And she says, sometimes even when given the opportunity, some girls are extremely conscious when playing in front of others. And she says, I have seen this in my school. And then as a result, we tend to lose out on girls who could be amazing sports players in the future. How do we encourage these girls to start playing?
Oh, interesting question. It's difficult, right? Because I think as girls, we get so used to being judged on our appearances. We get taught that there is a certain attribute that is feminine, that is girly, and you know that doesn't often match up with being athletic, being competitive, being aggressive on a sports pitch. You know, so it's difficult to balance those things. But I feel like the modern woman is fully capable of balancing those things. There's no real contradiction there. You know, women are, I think it's important for women to realize that you can be successful, which often does demand being aggressive, being dominant, being willing to give your voice in situations, without that meaning not being feminine. You know, women can have strong opinions and still be feminine. And I think that that's something that we need to kind of, I guess, teach from younger ages, that there isn't a contradiction between those two things. I think, unfortunately, with a lot of social media and things, you know, a lot of the influences, it's so much about your physical now, and it's so much about how you look. And, you know, social media, the more you engage with it, the more you can kind of feel frustrated with how you look, because it doesn't match up to the people that you're seeing on Instagram or whatever, who are filtered and have retouched and have made their butt bigger and their waist smaller and all these different things. And it's so hard to match up to that. And I can find that. I can find myself feeling really just dissatisfied. And I think it's important to disconnect from that and to choose the people that you want to follow, that do inspire you, and inspire you in a real way, and inspire you to be a better you. I think there's no reason for us not to feel like we are girly and beautiful just because we are dripping with sweat, or you've got a bloody nose if you're a boxer or whatever. To me, that's beautiful. I think we have to redefine what beautiful means. And I think determination, willingness to succeed, to go through what it takes to succeed, to go through that pain and struggle is a different kind of beauty, and it's the kind of beauty that we need to aspire to more.
Incredible. We got a question from Flora, and I'm not sure even I know like the full answer of it, but she wants to know, how are those in the sports industry staying afloat in the time of Corona? Is there any disproportionate effect on girls and women in sports considering these times?
I don't think so. As far as I know, I don't think it's disproportionate. I think it's difficult for people in the sports industry, the same as it's difficult for people in, pretty much every industry going. My fiance works in radio, so he's really blessed that he can do that from home. And I think radio has become a really big part of the sports kind of industry at a time like this, because it's the one voice that we can still really have access to. So I really enjoyed watching his podcast and listening to his radio. That keeps me going every day. I think for people who are used to working around a live sports event, which is obviously completely on hold right now, other than maybe WWE, that's probably it. I think it's been hard, and I think we've all had to try and figure out, can we do content differently? Can we, what can we put on air? And also, how important is it to be putting stuff on air right now? There's a difficult balance to find between us feeling like sports is everything, but also knowing that a time like this, it's not the most important thing, right? And as much as we all need that entertainment and something to dive into and something to help distract us, at the same time, it kind of comes much lower down the ranking in terms of what can we get back to. I'm sure that school comes way before sport in that ranking. So, a network like Fox or like TNT that I also work for have been putting together certain shows with, different members of talent and broadcasters at their houses. But that's limited, of course, because, the part of what we love to see on TV is that interaction between people. And, it's more difficult when that's all done via Zoom and people aren't in the same room and you don't have that same interpersonal reaction. So I think for the sports industry, it's a scary time. For sports fans, it's a difficult time because, we're just watching rerun after rerun, and we all love live content and current content. It's been really interesting for me to kind of see all the different leagues come out with the ideas of how they can get this played. And obviously, everybody's obviously really invested in getting back to sports. But I think it's going to be a little while for sports industries to bounce back. I think that's affected people across the board, males and females alike. I don't really think there's a difference there.
Awesome. Well, I know we're running out of time, so girls, if you want to put in your last minute questions, please do so. I know I have two last questions for you. The first one is, if you could do this all over again, do you think you would be playing a sport? Would you pursue a sport instead of being on the camera?
No, you know what? I love the role that I have. It's given me an opportunity to, I've been at World Cup finals, Champions League finals, massive fights, historic fights. I get to see so many different things. I've worked in so many different continents. It's been a real joy to me, and there's nothing that I would change if I could do over it. If I had the talent, with the talent I had, no, I don't think I should have gone into sports, but I was good enough, but I wasn't great. And I think, these people, these women and men who achieve at this level, that they're so great. And I didn't have that. I was decent, but I wasn't great. So no.
Kate, I think you prove the point that like everybody can still participate in sports. It's not just the athletes, it's the broadcasters, the coaches. So I think that's what we find really cool about you, is that you're still proving that women and girls still have a space in the sports industry. So last question I'll bring up to you, and we talked a little bit about this, so I hope you had time to think about it. So our Girl Up, we always say, who is your girl hero, whether they're in the STEM fields and politics, but for sports, who is your sports girl hero?
I suppose I didn't even think about politics or anything like that. There's obviously, you know, in all areas of life, there are women who have kind of blazed a trail, right, and kind of pushed through glass ceilings to enable other women to come after them. I think probably one of the groups or the people I would have picked out would have been the US women's national team for that whole fight for pay equality. I think that's so important to kind of set a path to not just think about your own well-being, because a lot of those girls are doing well off Nike sponsorships or whatever it might be, and I'm sure there's a number of them who are living well, but they're also thinking about the precedent that is set for the women that follow them, and I think that's really important. I guess as well, because I cover boxing, I think of women like Clarissa Shields, who go into a sport like boxing, which is even more masculine than many other sports, and really doesn't create room or space for women to succeed. It's something that you really have to fight your way to, literally. And I think that, to see a woman like that who had a very clear path set out in her own mind of what she wanted to achieve in terms of Olympic goals, and then going on to turning professional, and doing that within an environment which really is not welcoming to women. And really, you don't even see them represented on TV. It's, there's not a lot of women's fighting on television, in boxing at least. And I think to see somebody like that go through, have just set themselves a goal and figure out the path to that goal, despite the number of people around her who must have said, this will never work, or you're not welcome here, or you'll never make money off this. And so more power to somebody like her who's doing that.
Well, Kate, I want to thank you on behalf of all the girls that tuned in and the entire Girl Up team for being so genuine and just open about all these different questions that came up. I think we all look up to you so much, and you are the one out, in the sports industry making a difference. So thank you so much for joining. And I don't know if there's any other last minute thing that you want to share to our girls tuning in today.
Oh God. No, I don't think so. I think, what would my final words be? I think that there is a place for us, and I think that there is opportunity for us. I think it's just, hard work will get you a really long way. I think it's important to visualize where you want to get to in life and in your career. And if you don't visualize it, it's really hard for you to achieve it, because you can't figure out the steps to get there. So I think, try and spend some time really figuring out where it is that you want to get to. Also enjoy every step that you're at along the way. If you're an ambitious person, it can be really easy to fall into that trap of always looking at where you want to be next and not really valuing the blessing of where you are. I think that's really important too. I think don't panic if you don't know exactly where you want to get to. Sometimes, life and destiny or God will lead you to where you're supposed to be. I think if you follow the things that you believe you're talented in, and follow the things that give you real enjoyment, you will always put in time and effort into the things that you are passionate about. And that's what I think, I think it can be really important not to follow the things that you think will earn you a bunch of money. Follow the things that you're passionate about, because they're the things that you'll really invest in. And I think generally speaking, the things that you invest dedication and hard work into, the money will then follow for you. So that would be my advice.
That's amazing, Kate. And I'm not sure if you're checking the chat, but shout out to Christina, who says, I hope to see you someday in Mexico broadcasting the Women's Soccer League.
Con mucho gusto, me gustaría mucho.
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much again, Kate. I don't know if you want to stick around, but for those of you that are still viewing, I'm actually going to go ahead and share / give a sneak preview to some of the resources that we're working on with Sports for a Purpose. As you know, we finished our sports weeks with different webinars, different speakers. So now if you're tuning in via a laptop, hopefully you are able to see my screen. I will go ahead and share my screen to share with you all a couple of things that the Girl Up team is working on that you can take action. So first up, I won't show you the entire thing, but we do have a couple of items that we want to share with everybody in terms of just what are some of those online actions that you can take from home to still be a gender equality advocate in sports. So as some of you all know, if you have clubs, every spring we have the Global 5K, which is an opportunity for everybody to be active. And you're probably wondering, how are we going to do a 5K this year? Well, our team worked really hard to make sure that we provided some online opportunities. So I encourage everybody to go to girlup.org/global5K, and you can register for a team, and you can find out just some of the online activities that you can do at home. And a lot of your fundraising efforts are going to go towards supporting some of our global public health initiatives for girls. So as you can see, I see some people already signed up for the Global 5K, which is super awesome. We do have a goal, so please, if you can, register. A couple of other things is that you can actually sign our petition calling for greater gender equality at the Summer Olympics. Here is a quick preview. As you can tell, we need everybody's effort to sign this petition, so more to come on this. Other things that you can do, and I've seen some of your clubs actually do this already, but we do have a lot of sports for a purpose resources in the Girl Up community that you can download, present a PowerPoint at your next club meeting on Zoom. You can do other things like Workout Wednesday with your club. Some other clubs that I've seen on Instagram is using the hashtag sports for a purpose to tag their sports girl hero. And again, just tackling the issue on how we perceive women and girls in the media. I think this goes a long way. Some other things to do is we have amazing video content from our friends at WWE, who just want to share more about their journey to sports and how you can also take action. I do remember some of you asking more about like Title IX resources for those girls in the US. I think it's super important for all of us to know about what is Title IX. So you'll see there's a link here that you can click and download some of our Title IX resources, thanks to our friends at the Women's Sports Foundation. Other things that you can do, of course, is having like a Netflix viewing party. And there's a lot of films on Netflix that do highlight women and girls in sports. As you may know, our friends at WWE have also been helping us, and they have some of their, the WWE Network free. And then, of course, as always, we want to hear from you all. What has been your experience in sports? And I think having blogs, stories, real content from you all, that is super important for us to know, because we want to highlight your real stories and really tackle on what it means to have representation about women and girls in sports. The last thing I want to show to everybody before we log off, let me make sure that I'm actually sharing with you all our website. So if you go ahead and just click girlup.org/sports, it'll take you to everything that I'm talking about here. So everything from the Global 5K, what are some of the issues? As you know, we had amazing virtual panels, but really getting into what are some of those educational content that you can bring to your friends and your peers, even from an online platform. So you'll get all the statistics that we kind of alluded to today, and hoping that we can all change this. And so if you write a blog, this is actually where it will live on our website, and it could be in English, Spanish, your native language. So we're really open to that. I think our goal here is just for you all to use Girl Up as your platform to make a difference in gender equality. So I hope everybody can get involved. Like I said, you can learn the facts and download all of our amazing resources. You can take a stand by signing our petition, or you can join the Girl Up community if this is your first time hearing about Girl Up. You can still start a club. So we're happy to help you throughout that process. On that note, I want to just wrap up by saying thank you so much to everybody for tuning in. We will be having more webinars for you all to join that go even beyond just sports, but also STEM, gender equality, and media representation. So all that to say, thank you again, Kate, for joining. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. I know we're all in different time zones, so this was super cool, and I hope to see you all at the next webinar. Bye, everybody.